Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be bringing you a card that has lots of gold and black on it. And before I get to all of the gold, I'm going to be painting some watercolor paper completely black. So I'm using this black shade of paint, of watercolor paint, from my Gansai Tambi palette. I've just pulled it out of the palette so it's a little bit easier to work with on camera. And I'm adding not a lot of water. I want this to be as dark of a pigment as possible while I paint this. So I'm using a little bit of water on this wide tipped brush and painting a layer. And you'll notice as it dries, it really grays back. It's not very intense. So I'm actually going to do 3 layers of this black watercolor paint because I want it to be really, really dark black. The watercolor paper I'm using today is from Strathmore. This is some 5x7 pre-cut paper, and I just taped it down onto a hardboard using some blue painter's tape. And I taped it down because I was going to be adding so much paint and I didn't want the paper to warp too much. And as it dries, or I use my heat tool to dry it, it will dry back very, very flat, so it'll be easy to work with later on. So after I had a really, really dark background to work with, I brought in the stamp set that has the greeting I'll be working with today. This is the Wishing You stamp set from Mom Elephant. And I decided that it might be better to work with it on a vertical card. So I'm actually going to turn the board here, and that's how I'll be painting the rest of my card. So as far as the gold goes, I'm going to be using the Gansai Tambi Starry Colors palette, and I'm going to use the color on the end called blue gold. And I've got this kind of swatch sheet that I've done using a bunch of my different pearlescent watercolors, and I just wanted to make sure that was the real color that I wanted, and it was. So this is the blue gold. Like I did with the black paint, I want this gold paint to be as thick and pigmented as possible. So I'm going to spend quite a bit of time kind of swirling my brush in that little pan of color, trying to get it as thick as possible. And then as I come in and add these brush strokes, I'm adding them in just a few at a time. And you'll notice that it's adding some black to my pan of gold color, which isn't a problem. I can just clean off my brush and then just pick up that paint and swipe it away. So like I did with the black, I'm going to do a few different layers of this gold shade. So I'm going to go ahead and dry this first layer. And then I'm going to come back in, and I think I did probably 3 layers, just like I did with the black. And as I add more of this gold on here, I'm doing it in more sparing strokes. I don't want to like swipe over it over and over again. I'm just doing one here or there because I really want to preserve that cool look of the kind of dry end of the brush kind of stroking off. And I want this to be the like a specific size to go behind that large Wishing You greeting. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the stamp set and pull that over and just make sure it's the right size. It looks like I'm pretty good. So in order to finish this off, I did have one little splatter of paint, and it was an accidental splatter. So I decided to make it more intentional. I would go ahead and add a bunch of other little splatters on top, which turned out to be a really good thing. I like how it turned out. So I'm kind of glad that I had that accidental splatter so that it would encourage me to do more splattering. So I think it looks really, really cool, kind of reminiscent of a night sky or even like confetti, like a celebration. And since this is an anniversary card, I thought that would be perfect. So I've removed my watercolor piece from my board, and now I'm going to do some stamping. So I've got my stamp, and I've placed the watercolor piece in a MISTI stamping tool, and I have that stamp on top. I'm going to swing the door over to pick it up. I'm prepping the area with a powder tool, and then I'm using some Versamark ink to stamp my Wishing You greeting. And I'm actually going to stamp this twice because I want to make sure I have a really good impression. And so I've stamped that once, and then I'm going to stamp it one more time as well. And I like to do this on watercolor paper because watercolor paper in general is more textured than any other smooth cardstock you might be used to. So it's always a good idea to kind of stamp things twice if you're going to be embossing it on watercolor paper. So now I've got some Hero Arts white embossing powder and I'm sprinkling that on. And even though I did stamp it twice, you'll notice that there's an area kind of in the middle where I've missed some of the lettering. So I'm going to be fixing that in a minute here, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and shake off the excess embossing powder and then bring my heat tool over to heat set this until it's smooth and melted. So in order to fix the lettering, I'm coming in with a Zig, I think it's a emboss scroll and brush pen or something like that. I'll have it linked down below and also at my blog. But I just used the brush tip of that marker to apply some sticky ink so that I could apply the embossing powder. And I couldn't really see where I was drawing because it is clear. So in order to clean up these letters, I just used the sharp point of an X-Acto knife to scrape off any of that excess powder that I didn't want. So I was able to kind of shape the letters a little bit. So I'm using my heat tool to melt and heat set that once more. And then I'm going to stamp this a happy anniversary stamp from the stamp set in some VersaFine Onyx Black ink onto some Nino Solar white cardstock. I'm going to be cutting this out and using it as a little tiny tag underneath the large wishing you. So I'll stamp that and then set it aside. My card base is made out of some basil marshmallow cardstock, and I've created a 5x7 card base with a side fold. And I just scored that at 5 inches to create the 5x7 card. So now I'm going to go back to that watercolor palette, the gold Starry Night palette from Gansai Tambi, and I'm picking up some of that gold on a smaller brush, and I'm painting the edges of my watercolor piece. I kind of placed it on top of my card base, and I realized that it needed just a little bit of something extra around the edges of the card. So I thought that this painted edge would be nice. Plus, I like that it looks a little bit more hand painted when it's like this. It's not a precise edge. I just really like how this turned out. And I used my heat tool to speed up the drying process as well. I wasn't shy with the foam tape, as you can see, and then I brushed off any extra powder that may have been sitting on top and pressed that down onto my card base. So I'm almost done. I'm just going to adhere the second half of that greeting, and I've cut it into a little tiny narrow strip, and then I've cut 2 V-shaped ribbon ends. And I'm going to use a really thin strip of foam tape that I've cut down to adhere it down onto the card. So I wanted to add even a little bit more shine and bling onto this card, so I grabbed some gold sequins. These are from Pretty Pink Posh, and I'm adhering them with some Ranger Multi-Medium Matte adhesive. And I'm just picking each one up with tweezers, squirting out a little tiny glob of glue, and then placing that back down. And if you're wondering about that fine tip on my glue bottle, I'll have that linked in the video description and in the supply section at my blog. So that's the anniversary card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I think you could mix up the colors or the sentiment and turn this into a bunch of different occasions. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.